All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's presentation of the CURC webinar series entitled Safety and Sustainability Reusables During COVID-19. My name is Eric Halverson. I'm the program coordinator for the College and University Recycling Coalition, and I'll be your moderator for today. For those of you not familiar with CURC, the College and University Recycling Coalition is a member-based organization that works to grow collegiate recycling and waste reduction efforts by fostering technical information exchange and networking opportunities between students and staff leaders implementing programs on college and university campuses. Today's program is part of our free CURC webinar series, which is designed to highlight innovative campus programs and provide trends and perspectives on a broad range of operational and educational topics related to collegiate recycling and sustainable materials management. Today's program is the second webinar in our 2021 series, so welcome. Now we have a few housekeeping notes to go over. If you have problems with your audio or video during the webinar, we recommend you visit support.zoom.us to troubleshoot any technical issues. And to avoid background noise, we've placed all but our panelists' lines on mute. We do encourage you, however, to submit questions at any time by using the Q&A section of the Zoom dashboard, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. We will read as many of these as possible out loud to our speakers at the end of each presentation. And also copies of today's presentation slides will be available to download and a recording available to stream within the next day or so from the CURC website, www.curc3r.org. Now, a little over a year ago, our campuses completely transformed as the pandemic began in earnest. And I know that many of you have experienced the roller coasters of changes, especially when it comes to campus dining. We endured the recommendations to ditch the reusables and head for single-use plastics, but as early as last summer, these policies shooting down reusable dining were being debunked by the world's scientific community, even if the perception of safety can still be a problem. Here at CURC, we know that the safest world, both for people and the environment, is one that manages to reduce our plastic consumption and slow the spread of COVID-19. Today, we'll hear from two campuses working to make that world a reality in different ways. First, we will hear from Sarah Levesque from Northwestern University about their campus's recent expansion of the reusable dining program. Then we will hear from Oregon State University's Andrea Norris and Lilly Butler about their campaign to get diners to switch to reusable utensils instead of using disposable options. First, we'll hear from Sarah. Sarah Levesque has an MS in Sustainable Management from DePaul University. She is passionate about the circular economy, creating equitable food systems, and can be found digging through the compost or tending to the hydroponic units on their campus. So welcome, Sarah.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and to share the story of Northwestern on our reusable journey during COVID. So a little bit of background information. We have had two reusable programs over the past 3 years. One we started off whenever Compass Group first came to campus about 3 years ago. It was a standard to-go program with lime green Aussie O2Gos where students would come, they would pay $5 and then receive an Aussie that they could then exchange for free or return and get a $5 refund. It was a successful program. It was much smaller. It was something that students could opt into, but obviously with COVID, that changed a lot. So whenever we came back, we were planning for coming back in the fall. We wanted to make sure that we created a solution that met a lot of requirements, starting off with it was safe for students and staff, number one. And then we really wanted to prioritize reuse and then compostable and then recyclable. We needed to make sure it fit well into the program and it minimized waste as much as possible. Northwestern only invited about 500 students back to campus in fall of 2020. So that did have an initial limitation to the program, but we made one large purchase in the summer when we weren't really sure how many students were coming back. So we made an intentionally very large purchase of Aussie containers, purple to match the school colors, and it worked out really well. Here is a rundown of our program from a student perspective and a staff perspective. We wanted to make sure that this program was as simple and straightforward as possible for everybody. So students, whenever they arrive, they would tap their card in at the cashier, which we have at the very front of every single location, and they would receive a new clean Aussie container. They would then go to each station where they could get, where they would be served food, and then they could choose to either eat in, of course, with proper social distancing and sanitization, and then, or they could take their food to go. And whenever they either left after finishing eating, they could return their Aussie to the dish return, or whenever they came back, they could just return their Aussie then and get a new one for free. There was no buy-in. The only sort of setup we did is during their quarantine period, we did give each student a purple Aussie and told them to bring it to the first time they came to campus for their meal, and students followed that really well. For staff, our focus was mainly PPE and making sure there's plenty of plexiglass dividers. You can see exactly where all of the staff has different types of PPE here. The dishwashers have the most, with several pairs of gloves, masks, goggles, etc. And then we also make sure to run through the Aussies through a dishwasher with a high temperature boost. This was something that really helped to reassure people whenever they were unsure if this was really safe. The high temperature boost really added extra assurance to them. We had a really successful program, and I attribute that to creating a behavior change. Whenever we created this program, it was based off of asking students to change their behavior rather than implementing a composting program, for example. So students were individually handed their Aussie containers. And then at the first 2 lunches and dinners, we had extra managers on site to add support and answer any questions students may have had. And this was really, I think, instrumental in making that behavior change. Because whenever students came back on the fall to campus, they knew their dining experience was going to be different. And they were open to that change. They were open to making that change. Here are some of our results. This was our results from the fall. So this kind of goes over, if you read the case study, this is what the results look like. We served about 819 meals per day. 99% of them used an Aussie container. About 21% used additional compostable clamshells. The reason for this is we only provided 1 Aussie container per student per meal. So if they wanted extra food, we would give them a compostable container and they could put that in there. Also, we do have a Pure Eats, which is a allergen friendly station. So the students could go immediately to Pure Eats and then they could have food put in there. But if there's already food in the container, we would give a disposable container to avoid cross-contamination. So about 21% of meals fit into those categories. And then overall, throughout the quarter, estimated about 1.2 tons of waste were avoided. And then it had a 6-month ROI, which was very impressive. But in January, the campus actually brought back more students. So about 2,500 students came back in winter quarter. So we kind of revamped the program a little bit. We added in extra places where students could return their Aussie containers, these large sort of bins right at the cashiers. So it was easier for traffic flow. And then we served close to 4,000 meals a day, again, with about 99% using the Aussie container. Only 15% of meals use additional compostable clamshells. The difference we attribute to the population change. In the fall, the majority of students, there's a large portion of students that were athletes, so they were eating a lot more than 1 Aussie container. And then since they now represent a lower percentage in the winter, we saw the overall percentage go down. And then we avoided about 9 tons of waste just in winter quarter. So total over 10 tons of waste was avoided. And then once we added in all of the extra students, the ROI went down to 1 month. So we've actually been seeing a return since February on the whole program. And we haven't had issues with students not returning clamshells or Aussie containers until spring break. I do want to be totally transparent about that. Over spring break, since we transitioned to all to-go dining, students did tend to almost hoard and collect a lot of them. We did run an amnesty day and we got so many back. Students would come in with 5 or 6 at a time. And we were able to get a large majority of Aussie containers back. If you have any, I know that was kind of quick. So if anybody has any questions, please let me know.
We are getting some questions in. So a reminder to everyone who hasn't submitted a question yet that if you have them, please use the Q&A section on the Zoom dashboard to type those in to us. So the first question is, how do you keep track regarding whether people have returned their containers?
That is actually one of the programs, I think, weaknesses and strengths is we don't track individual containers or individual people. So we don't really have a good sense of that. We don't know how many are in circulation at one time. The reason why we decided to do that was because it simplified the program a lot. We really, really focused on simplification and making sure that we had a lot of students who didn't have questions. We just wanted to simplify it as much as possible and have the least amount of management involved in this, which I think is part of our success. But it also means that we can't track. We can't tell who has how many out or anything like that.
Yeah. When you are using the collection, do you use the Aussie machine? Someone wants to know?
No, we decided not to go with that because for our campus, it didn't make sense and they're really expensive. And so it just didn't make sense. We have the ability for students to return the containers at all of our 4 dining locations. And whenever one location is running low, another location normally has a lot. So we're able to kind of redistribute as needed.
So when you're looking at lost containers, maybe from spring break, how does that factor into your ROI?
We have not had to make any additional purchases. So there has been no cost except for the initial purchase. And then we also, again, like I said, we got most of them back. We have a really good relationship with housing and facilities on campus. So if they see Aussie containers, they'll actually bring them back to us as well. So we haven't had a loss rate that's really impacted the program at all.
Okay, and for those temperature, for the high temperature cleaning that you're using for the Aussies, folks are curious what temperature and for what duration, whose job is it to make sure those are cleaned to the highest standard?
Yeah, so that's part of whenever you have like a food safety inspection, they're going to be going in and making sure that those dishwashers are running properly. There are 2 types of main dishwashers. There's the chemical and then there's the high temperature. We use the high temperature. But again, if you follow your local food safety regulations and food preparation regulations, you should be fine as long as you're compliant.
Okay. And the collecting of the used containers, have you had to set up any kind of special logistics to accommodate those containers in your dining? And has that been a hindrance?
Not really. In the fall, we had all of the students return to the dish returns because they're close enough at most of our locations to the cashiers that it was able to work out. But with the additional students coming on, we did, for the sake of traffic, add some larger bins right next to the cashiers. So students could actually just drop it and grab a new one to make sure that there was an ease of traffic flow.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that answers the next question I was going to go to. If students had to stop by a cashier to get a container before each meal, or if it's kind of like you go up to a food service place and they give you them with the food.
Yeah, our locations are set up so students have to go to the cashier first in order to get into the dining area. So they can't avoid the cashier. So that makes it really easy, just how we're set up.
Gotcha. For the longevity of using the containers, do you have any expectations as to how long, until the containers might just end up breaking too many or withstanding the washes and things like that?
Yeah, we did initially, whenever we'd open up a new box, there were some defects in some of the Aussie containers, but Aussie as a O2Go as a company has been really great. They will replace all of those containers, so we haven't had a problem with that. And then so far, they withstand a lot. Those things are very, very tough. And we plan in the fall to go back to reusable zero waste dining model. And kind of the question is, what are we going to do with all of the Aussie containers come fall? Because while I expect more students will be using the to-go program than before, we still have all of the purple and all of the green
All of the purple and all of the green.
Aussie containers. So the green ones were from pre-COVID. Those were the $5 buy-in program that will be continuing in the fall.
Gotcha. How was it getting the student engagement on the program? And was there anything special that you did to educate folks or kind of reassure them that this is a safe and possible thing for them to be doing right now?
Yeah, we did a couple of unique things. Since they were in quarantine, as soon as they got into their dining common or their dining area or their residential commons, they received like a lot of breakfast items since we were doing delivery to them for 2 weeks. And then they also received a brochure that had all of the information about what to expect whenever they arrived. How does the Aussie program work? And then again, at their last meal that they had delivered during quarantine, they were individually handed the container and told to bring it next time they go to the dining hall. So again, they kind of knew things were going to be different. They had access to information before they even arrived. And then once they did arrive, we had people on site to answer questions. And I think that really helped reassure them because they had managers who were there who were just ready to answer questions and help them out with it. We also had several chat lines and services like that if they had any questions as well. We also have compostable, if they still don't feel like they're still unsure, we also have the compostable option available. Most of them, we really haven't had any problems with that. Students feel very reassured whenever they see all of the extra precautions we're taking.
Do you have any programs set up for beverages or for utensils for eating? And is that something that you're looking into?
We don't at the moment. We will again in the fall. We'll be bringing back all of our reusables. Right now, we decided against it mainly because of saliva and more safety concerns.
Is there a certain like study or anything like that that was influencing you in that decision?
Not specifically. This was a decision made over the summer whenever people were still very uncertain and we really weren't sure what was going on, but everybody was very concerned about saliva. And that was the main concern was the object being put into people's mouths.
Yeah. All right. And back to the storing and the using of the containers. What kind of space does it require? I mean, maybe across the dining halls and things like that to be using the 8,000 or so reusable containers?
Yeah, so we keep them in boxes until they need to be used, obviously. And so that's just, basement storage or whatever. And then honestly, once we're open, it is a continuous cycle of containers going in and out. So there isn't necessarily a lot of storage we have to devote during the day to make sure that we have plenty of space. And at night, we're able to just kind of put them all into the dish rooms and store them there, bring them out whenever students start arriving.
Right. And as far as using the Aussies, the ones that do break, do you know what materials they're made out of and what do you do with the broken ones?
Yes, they are made out of plastic number 5. So they are fully recyclable on campus. So that's what we do with them. We do recycle them. And then again, Aussie will send out new ones as replacements.
And when students are returning the Aussies and stuff, are you still trying to collect kind of like organic waste from those, like any leftover food, food scraps, things like that? Or are those mostly going straight into trash to avoid contamination or?
Yeah, unfortunately, we did try to compost all of the food scraps that were returned. Unfortunately, the contamination rate was just too high. And so we did have to switch in the dish rooms to landfill. But overall, students, they tend to eat everything that's on there, especially if they take it to go. I don't really know why that's different. And that's sort of something that I've observed. So I don't have data behind it. But I have noticed that there is less food waste whenever they take it to go, just watching the dish returns.
Yeah, I can imagine seeing that. Like
Mhm.
when I take something home from the restaurant, I don't want to just leave it on the plate.
Yeah.
Right. Let's see if we can take one or two more questions before we move on to the next presentation. Um, Here is a question. Someone wants to clarify, and I apologize if I didn't catch this either. But did you say that the Aussie replaces the containers when they are old enough that they need to be recycled?
Yeah, it's if there's a defect. Um, if there's a defect, then they will.
Okay. Oh,
But I
this,
think each container is good for like 1,000 uses. So you've got some time before they really start to break down.
gotcha. Yeah. Um, Here's an interesting one. When doing the ROI, does that include increased water use from washing?
No, we did not do that. That was one area that I was not able to calculate and include in the ROI. But if you get that in depth, I think if you're looking at the water footprint, you also have to include the water footprint of the compostable containers that we compared against. Um, and so, I think it becomes a matter of whether or not you are taking charge and owning the water footprint or if you're sending it farther up the supply stream.
Yeah, absolutely. And maybe the last thing you can speak on is what that process of deciding to take on this program, even before COVID, of choosing reusables over something like compost. What made this the better option for your campus?
I mean, plain and simple, so many reasons, but starting off with cost efficiency, constantly having like compostable containers, they're expensive, and constantly having all of that, that just really, really adds up. And also, I mean, reusables, we already have the dish returns, we already have it set up, we already have the labor for it. So let's just go with it. Let's stick with it. And really, it just makes sense. It has a better dining experience for all the students who come in. We're able to more effectively manage food waste. We're more able to effectively manage serving sizes and what is going into the plates. You know, for us, there was no question whether or not we would do reusable. It was just always going to be reusable.
Right. Thank you so much, Sarah. I know I learned a lot from reading the case study and checking this out. So if you want to read more about it, check out the case study on the CURC website too. And Sarah's email was up there if you have some more further questions, if we can't get to them later in the program. All right. Now we will move on to our next presenters. Andrea Norris and Lilly Butler from Oregon State University. Andrea Norris serves as the Marketing and Development Coordinator in the Materials Management Department of Oregon State University, where she has worked for over a decade. Her work focuses on marketing via events, presentations, digital and print communications, and serving as an advisor to the Waste Watchers Student Club, as well as program development via pilot programs, partnerships, strategic planning, and more. Lilly Butler is an outreach program assistant for the Materials Management Department at Oregon State University. She is also a natural resources and sustainability student at OSU. She co-coordinates the Waste Watchers Student Club and has worked on projects like repair fairs, a reusable bottle campaign, and school supplies giveaways that distribute supplies from the OSU surplus program to low-income students. So welcome, Oregon State University. Happy to have you.
All right. Thanks for the introduction. First, just a bit about Oregon State. Our main campus is located in Corvallis, Oregon, on the traditional homelands of the Marys River or Ampanefu Band of Kalapuya. We have a little over 33,000 students, 23,000 of which are registered at the Corvallis campus, over 200 academic programs at the undergrad, grad, and doctorate levels, plus robust research and community engagement efforts. We have a mature but ever improving recycling program that was started 51 years ago by student volunteers around the first ever Earth Day. And our COVID operations this year look like having over 90% of our classes being fully remote this entire year. And we started the year with a little over half the usual number of Res Hall residents living on campus and have been slowly dropping throughout the year. The campaign that we ran in fall and winter quarters are talking about today was encouraging students, specifically targeting students living on campus, to put together a set of reusable eating utensils wrapped in cloth and use those instead of disposables when they order food on campus. So here's a bit about why we chose reusable utensils as our target behavior. Anecdotally, we were hearing student concern about all the excess waste in food service, meaning that they cared about the issue. And our students had almost no options for using reusables, and that we were not offering dine-in with reusable dishes due to our COVID restrictions. We suspended our reusable to-go container program that we usually have running, and reusable mugs are not accepted at this time either. So building a set of reusable utensils and refusing disposable ones is a step folks can actually take action on right now. We also suspected this was an opportune time to introduce the use of personally maintained reusables when people are feeling iffy about sanitation and may like the peace of mind that comes with knowing where their utensils have been. 3, this behavior change will still be relevant and impactful after COVID because even pre-pandemic, we do not have a reusable option for to-go utensils. And lastly, our team had recently received training in community-based social marketing, and we're looking for ways to apply the strategies we learned. Now I'm going to pass it off to Lilly, who is going to talk about the outreach tactics we deployed.
Thank you. So we started off with some bread and butter outreach tactics, which included a new webpage with sections on how to make bringing reusables with you a habit, how to make a utensils kit with step-by-step pictures and instructions, and local resources for purchasing materials for a homemade kit. We also created marketing blurbs for listservs and sent emails to professors and clubs asking them to spread the word about our campaign. We also asked clubs if they'd be willing to have us present our campaign at one of their meetings. Not many professors or clubs responded, but the clubs that asked us to present responded very positively, and we'll show you the results from our club visits in a bit. Finally, we created electronic slides and posters to go in residence halls, as well as posts to go on our social media pages. Throughout the 2 terms that we advertised this campaign, we attempted to use social marketing techniques and normal language in our marketing, like Andrea mentioned. Phrases like join everyone who has pledged can make folks feel more inclined to join in. We also gathered feedback from the student volunteers in the Waste Watchers Club to make the posters more effective and eye-catching. Next, we had to think a little bit outside the box in order to make an effective outreach plan for COVID times. So we started tabling outside of the dining centers on campus in fall term with just outreach employees in order to pilot the tactic and script. Again, we focused on social norming techniques and norming language in our script, which I'll walk you through in just a second. After the fall term, we passed along our tips and perfected script to the eco-reps, who are student representatives employed by a few sustainability organizations at OSU to educate about sustainability in the residence halls. We thought that the eco-reps would be the perfect people to take this on, as dining hall goers are more likely to recognize them as their peers. This fact can also help with creating the norm of caring about waste. So, this tactic of tabling at dining centers proved quite successful, as most of the folks we talked to had a positive reaction to the discussion and offered to take the pledge to make their own utensils kit. 2 out of 3 of those people even signed up for our texting service, which I'll talk about more in detail in just a few slides. So these are some of the phrases we used in our tabling script to create norms and help folks connect this issue of single-use utensils to issues that they already cared about and values that they hold. So one of our hooks was, how do you feel about the excess plastic that is being used during this pandemic? Which helps folks identify values they already hold dear and is likely to make them want to commit to actions that are more in line with their values. We also encouraged eco-reps to be observant of sustainable habits that folks were already engaging in. For example, if they notice somebody carrying a reusable water bottle with them, they could say, just as carrying your own reusable water bottle on campus is what everyone does here, it's becoming more and more common for people to bring their own reusable utensils to campus as well. That makes it sound like using reusables is something trendy that you want to get in on. We hope to assuage concerns about the safety of reusables and connect the issue to the values of waste reduction and personal responsibility/autonomy by saying using reusable utensils during COVID-19 is just as safe as using disposables. Bringing your own utensils allows you to know where they're coming from, plus you can reduce the amount of waste you produce by using reusables. Additional norming language came in when we asked them to join everyone who pledged. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but we liked using that phrase just because, again, it makes it sound like something trendy, a group that you want to be a part of. Before we made our script, we reached out to folks on our Instagram page and asked them how long it took to make it a habit to bring reusables with them. And we used that information to normalize the fact that habits take time and emphasize that it helps to get reminders. You can see here how we also emphasize that studies show that getting reminders can really help solidify habits, even if someone is really committed to making a new habit. Finally, we again mentioned that they are a part of a group committing to this action with the hope that this will make them feel more accountable to themselves and to others. Plus, by asking if we can take a photo of them, they would literally be representatives of this campaign. We'd post it on social media and posters and things like that, which would make them feel even more compelled to stick to their commitment. So on the next slide, I've included a sample simplified script in case you're interested in replicating something similar at your university. A tactic that was brand new to us this year was a texting service. As you just saw, folks that decided to pledge to make their own utensil kit were prompted to sign up for our texting service for reminders and tips. In our script, we emphasized that they would only get one reminder a week for 4 weeks, and that science backs up this approach to solidifying new habits. While we were tabling, folks opted in by giving us their phone number, and we would add the numbers in batches after each tabling session. Then the people that got signed up got a weekly text that was different each time. So on the bottom of this slide are the texts that folks received each week for the month they were signed up. The final text included a prompt to answer a survey, and Andrea will discuss the results of this in a few minutes. Our final tactic was born out of a collaboration opportunity with the Residence Hall Association, which organizes events and programs for residents and runs the Residence Hall councils for each part of campus. So RHA wanted to partner with us to reduce waste on campus and help residents establish new habits. They organized a utensil kit giveaway for people that pledged to use them, and those who registered for a kit had to check a box saying that they were willing to complete a survey. RHA made 50 kits by buying utensils from our local Goodwill, washing them in the dining hall dishwashers, and wrapping them in new napkins with ties. All 50 kits were picked up, and actually even more people signed up for kits and had to be turned away. So now I'm going to pass off the presentation to Andrea to discuss the results.
All right, thanks. Now onto the data. I'm going to go through a lot of numbers in the next few minutes, so a reminder that these slides will be posted on the CURC website. So all in all, we collected 247 pledges. As you can see, the majority came from tabling, the red and blue. We also have all the kit giveaway recipients in yellow. We got a decent number of pledges per club visit, which is the green, but this was a small count because so few groups were meeting during the pandemic or invited us to visit. Our passive traditional advertising may have brought in a small count, which would be lumped into the unknown category, but direct contact was clearly the most effective in gathering pledges. Of these pledgers, 137 subscribed to the text reminder service that Lilly mentioned. Again, tabling blue and red was the greatest source, but in this case, the kit giveaway was not a highly effective way to get getting text subscribers. Only about 8 of the 50 enrolled. I'll also mention we had a 12% unsubscribe rate, meaning folks who removed themselves before they received all 4 texts. Everyone who's enrolled in the text service was asked to reply on whether they made and used a kit or not, but only 19% of people responded. Because of this low response rate, plus a likely positive response bias, we're not highly confident in these survey results. Finding better ways to increase response rates would be an area of improvement if we repeat a project like this. The vast majority of those who did respond reported doing the behavior. On to the kit pledges. We got a better response rate to that survey. About 58% of kit recipients responded, so we feel more confident about these results. Something we learned is that the majority, or 62%, reported building this habit in just 1 week, and 100% of people said they did it within 3 weeks. And as Lilly alluded to, before this campaign, we estimated it takes an average of a month to build this habit, and we based our text reminder service around that. So this survey indicates that most people actually need less. Looking at the data, 2/3 use their kit half or more of the time. So most of them used it most of the time. We also see that 14% reported never using their kit at all. So these stats are a good reminder that behavior change is not all or nothing. You're not likely to get 100% participation 100% of the time. We did see that the use of disposables decreased after folks received kits. So you can see in the first row, we're looking at how many people use disposables half or more of the time. Use disposables half or more of the time. So nearly 2/3 of people used the disposables most of the time until they received their kits, and that dropped below half. And when we look at the percentage of people who sometimes or never use disposables, and that's our desired behavior, that increased quite a bit after they got their kits. We also looked at kit use among some subsets of survey respondents. So we're now looking at the percentage of people who use their kit half or more of the time. On average, 2/3 of people use their kit that often. But folks who use disposables at a higher rate before getting their kit use their kit even more often than average, meaning we got higher behavior change in the group that was less engaged before. And this also stands to make a greater positive environmental impact because they're displacing more disposables with their behavior. And people who subscribed to the text service use their kits that often at an even higher rate, which hints at the fact that the text service may be an effective strategy to experiment with in future campaigns. Some takeaways from our experience here. Direct contact is best in asking for behavior change. Apply social marketing principles in scripts and marketing materials. We especially found that it was helpful in our scripts. We were having a much higher positive response than when we've tabled in the past. Text reminders may work, but we need to improve the survey response rate to determine that. And providing a tool for reuse does increase the behavior, but keep in mind that that comes at a cost. So you have to balance that. So we'll leave it there and look forward to taking questions on what you'd like to learn more about. And I'll also leave this slide up for a bit for those who'd like to grab our email addresses and social media handles.
Right, thank you so much. This was so great to see and such a great approach. And I'm especially curious to start off with how you were, like what resources and anything you were pulling on for the scripts that you're using for outreach, because I think that seems like a great tool for people to lean on?
Yeah, we, Lily, chime in too, but I'd say our primary was, I was fortunate enough to be part of a workshop about community-based social marketing last June. And so there's sort of 5 primary strategies of CBSM, and you can do some research online. You don't have to take an intensive training necessarily. But there's 5 strategies that are, on average tend to be more effective in creating behavior change. And so we just sort of combed through those and figured out where we could apply them in the script. And then obviously with the slides being provided from today, you're welcome to steal any of the language that you see that Lily put on the slide for folks.
Yeah, for sure. And like Andrea said, this will be on the CURC website for you to check out afterwards. And for the tech service, what tech service did you use? Was it internally developed or was it a third party?
Another great question. We don't care to be an advertisement for the service we used. And this is the first time we've used one, so we don't have comparative experience with other companies. And when we did research, we found there were a lot of them on the market. So we did not have an in-house option, although I would encourage you to explore whether your university might have something already. But we used one called Textedly, which is like TEXTEDLY. And we just paid month to month until our campaign was complete and then canceled out the service.
Thank you. All right, we will look at a couple more questions here. The first one being, again, if you did say this before, for people who missed it, how many students participated?
So the 247 pledges is like really the closest number that would be what we consider participating. So that meant either they could have pledged in multiple ways. We considered them to have pledged if they signed up for the tech service, because we considered that like an earnest attempt to build this new habit. It could have been at the tabling. So the way that when we were tabling, we invited people to pledge. All they had to do was give us their name and we filled out an online form. And so that's how we captured that data. It was also where we captured their phone number if they did do the text service, et cetera. So yeah, it was the 247, which is like probably in the neighborhood of like 10% or more of our resident body. We also found that it was just straight up difficult to have direct contact with residents during the pandemic. The restrictions in Oregon and at our university are pretty major. So there's very little you can do in person within guidelines. And so the tabling was our primary source where we were able to get allowance for that activity as long as we followed a certain process. So that's kind of a long, the short answer is that we talked to more than 247, but 247 pledged in the end.
All right, let me see if I can see this question. Have you considered tracking the use of utensils, maybe from food services or dining, to compare against self-reporting from the participants that participated in this?
I love that question and thank you for asking it, because I didn't think I had enough time to talk about that in the presented part. So we were considering that, but we felt there were too many confounding variables that would have influenced that figure, that if we were able to obtain it, it wouldn't be meaningful data for our campaign. And the main confounding, well, there's a couple. One is that our population living on campus has been dropping. So one would expect our purchase, use, and disposal utensils would as well. But the other thing was that over time, and largely in part because of our partnership and conversations with folks in our dining program on campus, they were kind of trying to refine their own internal processes to no longer provide disposables as a default to every customer and try to have better processes that allow them to directly ask if do they need it or not, because we felt that a very large portion of our diners are probably just taking their food back to their room where they have utensils and they don't need disposables. So because of all that, we did not end up pursuing it, but I agree that is a much better metric if there were not confounding factors, because all we got to measure was how many people said they were going to do it and what data we could capture that was self-reporting whether they did it. But really what we were trying to aim for was decreasing the amount of disposables that OSU purchases. And in this case, we just couldn't find a way to effectively gauge that. So that would be something I would recommend for us or anyone else in the future, is like, how do you actually tie it not just to the behavior change that you're trying to get, but specifically how do you have the means to measure the impact that that behavior is supposed to achieve? So
yeah, that would be great to see. And as a follow-up to that kind of question, working with dinings in the future about reducing plastics use and trying to increase reusables, has this opened up different possibilities to changing the way those kinds of single-use things are passed out on campus, and maybe in the future leading to a more comprehensive reusable program?
I feel like Lilly should chime in on this one a bit, but the short answer is yes. We had a meeting with dining leadership in fall term, our fall quarter, and I feel like that kicked off a lot of conversation about a variety of things. And I think over time we've become more collaborative, because there have been times where we're just trying to push dining to do something that's along the lines of reducing consumption and waste. And I feel like we've had a more conversation, discussion-based and collaborative relationship. So it did open up conversation about what is it going to take to resume our reusable to-go container program, which has been existing as a mandatory default program at OSU for many years now, but was paused for the pandemic and still is now, largely due to the risk, the folks who are in charge of risk and legal at our university are wanting to play it pretty cautious. And so that's sort of under review right now. But I don't know, Lily, if you want to chime in about reusable cups as well.
Yeah, so we've had like Andrea already mentioned, we've had like a lot of conversations about reusables going on at the same time. So we have like the reusable utensil piece that we were encouraging people to bring their own utensils. We did have some like pushback about like the language we were using. So originally on our posters, we emphasized that like people could take charge of their own health by bringing their own utensils. And we had like some pushback about that from dining because they were like, we're safe too. And then we had a conversation about, we have these like little delivery robots, like Starship, they're called Starship robots. And they were automatically like having disposable utensils being put in there. And so we've had conversations about like, can we make that an option? We've had conversations about like making sure that dining hall employees ask if people want a utensil rather than just giving it. So we've had some wins, but then separately, the thing that I'm most involved in is this conversation about reusable cups on campus, and reducing single-use coffee cups, soda containers, things like that. That's a conversation that I've been having with dining for like a year and a half now. Got really messed up because of the pandemic, but we actually just started a work group with some members of dining to walk through our proposal. The outreach team ended up making a proposal that would reduce single-use cups on campus by 78%. Basically, people can email me if you're interested in learning more about that. I'd be happy to talk about it in more detail. But I'll just focus on the fact that it's been a huge win to have a work group with dining. We've gotten some great like collaborative opportunities. We've started talking about contactless pour methods to re-implement, like using personal containers in dining facilities, and like that's been complicated. but it's overall just been really a good experience so far. And I think like having this work group is gonna open up a lot of doors for us in the future to talk about reusables in dining.
Yeah, that sounds very positive, especially during the pandemic, that people are still open to having those conversations looking forward. Yeah. All right, I believe we will end the questions there for today. Like Lily pointed out, and we've been pointing out, that you feel free to contact the speakers about more questions. You can find the slides for this and a link to the presentation recording on our website, curc3r.org. That will be put up by the end of the day today, and you can go and check those out. And their contact information for everyone who shared their presentations today will be up there. And now I'm going to do a few more announcements, and then we will thank our speakers one more time and end the program. So looking forward, if you enjoyed this today, we are so excited to continue the 2021 webinar series with the topics you see on the screen in front of you, coming up especially in June with the Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion in your program. This was something that people requested in the survey we posted last summer for CURC. So we're really excited to be sharing some resources on that topic in specifically, but the rest of these as well. As you can see in the middle of your screen, we are still looking for speakers for all of these. And so in an effort to make sure that the diversity of our members is represented in our webinars from all different types of institutions and all different types of perspectives, we have created a form for people to submit their proposals to speak on the webinars. There are still open speaking slots for each of these upcoming webinars. So if you or a program you're familiar with seem like a good fit, please fill out the form and submit yourself or nominate someone else to be a speaker for these upcoming webinars. You can find a link to the form in our post-webinar survey for today or on our website in our 2021 webinar series page. And if you enjoyed today also, as always, you can visit our website, which you can see at the bottom of the screen, because we have a webinar archive filled with webinars from over 10 years of doing presentations like this through CURC. So it's always a resource for you and always available for free. Once you leave the webinar today, you will be prompted to take a very quick survey about your experience with the presentation. So please share your thoughts with us so we can improve our webinars moving forward. And don't forget to submit an interest form if you are interested for future webinars on that survey. So one last time, join me in thanking Sarah, Andrea, Lilly for your presentations today and all your hard work on your campuses. It's great to see and it's great to learn from and hear about. So thank you for taking the time to do this today. And then you can look for their presentations, watch this recording again if you want to go back and catch some things that you might have missed in your notes on our website, curc3r.org. So have a good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming.